This is what my first screen in BSG looks like. Undoubtedly, yours in the student screen looks a little different. I'm going to launch the decisions and reports. If you noticed up here, it's a flash box that begins opening. I opened it a little bit earlier this morning, so it may download quickly, but it may take a while. Because this is a flash screen, those of you that are working with an iPad, particularly perhaps an older version of an iPad, may have some problems because it may not support Flash. I apologize that the screen capture is not perfect because I have to size the screen. Um, I can't capture quite my entire computer screen, and this Flash program expands to fill the whole screen. This is what it looks like when it opens up. It opens up on the Corporate Citizenship tab. I've already talked about don't go overboard with the corporate social responsibility stuff. This is the one tab that you can make your decisions, set it, and go from there. And it tells you down here what the total costs of your decisions are. The next screen is the branded sales forecast screen. And this is a very important screen for what you're going to be doing. Let me show you a few things around the screen that are important. First is over here, and I apologize that this is probably cut off in the video. This is earnings per share, return on equity, credit rating, image rating, net revenues, net profit, and ending cash. All very important things. But you heard me say what I don't want you to do is to chase these. And what I mean by that is don't sit over here and make changes looking to see what happens here. Implement your strategy and then look at that and see how you're doing. This does have the investor expectation on it. I don't want you to get hung up on that. I'm more interested in you seeing what other people in the industry are doing and outperforming people in the industry, although you probably shouldn't be settling in this screen for a less than investor expectation kind of outcome unless later on in the simulation you've been beat down pretty badly and you're not doing well and you're just trying to turn it around. A couple of the things that are on each of the screens. Up here you have a video tutorial. They have now put YouTube videos, which probably are explanations about like I'm going to give you. They also have the help page. The help page is very detailed. Not so much on this help page because I'm on the, well, actually it is. I'm off the corporate responsibility on the branded sales forecast. You can see that there are 9 pages total of help. So if you have a question on this, this is a great place to go. I find when you ask me questions, what do? I usually say, well, let's go and get the details off of the help screen. You can search within it. It's just a PDF kind of document. And then when you're done with it, you can either print it or just click go back to the entry screen. You can also print your screens up here. I don't know that you need to do that. The branded sales forecast is an extremely important screen, like I described to you earlier, for 2 reasons. First is it's going to actually tell you how many shoes you should expect to sell, which is going to determine your forecast, or I'm sorry, determine your production. And it also gives you a chance to see how things are going to work and to what might be a better use of your money. Just to quickly introduce you to how things work. This side is your internet sales forecast. This is what you think you're going to do, and this is your estimate of the industry. Here's the internet estimate. Here's the North America estimate, Europe, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. You are responsible for setting what you want in these screens. And this is very important because if I change my assumption for what your competitors are going to do, even if I don't change what you're going to do, obviously it affects your sales. And you can just see that. If you look here, our wholesale segment, we currently are forecasting with these settings, you'll sell 1.346 million shoes. Well, if I assume that the industry standard is going to go down to 4 stars, look, I went up to 1436. So not only do you have to put in your projections, you have to put in your estimate of what people are doing. And this is where the uncertainty comes in. If you assume that the industry is going to be overly competitive, then you probably don't build enough shoes. If you're assume the industry is less competitive than it proves to be, then you're probably going to end up with an excess number of shoes. You can go in and just say, I want to make it 10% more competitive, and I actually just reset that. I can go in and say I want to make it 10% more competitive, okay, and you can see by making it 10% more competitive, I dramatically changed my sales. I went from 1.3 million to under a million shoes, and that's why these are critical. Part of, in the early stages, you're not quite sure what to do. In the latter stages, you're actually going to be able to either average what the industry is doing. If there are a couple of key people you're battling against, you're one of the industry leaders, you might want to strictly go with the industry leaders. And then you want to enter your decisions. And this is how you can see, well, what's going to be the impact of a lot of my, a lot of my decisions. And here, for example, is a way to make some trade-offs. You can say, well, what would happen if I put $1 million extra into my advertising budget? Well, notice it went from 1346 to 1409. Okay, well, let me put it back to to $7 million, and let me change my rebate offer per shoe to $10 per shoe. Well, let's make it $5 per shoe, because I'm selling about 1 million shoes, so if I change it by $1, it's going to have about $1 million increase. Keep in mind, with the rebate shoe offer, a lot of people don't redeem them, but you can compare, well, where would that $1 million be better spent? And obviously, this is real trade space among what you're doing, but to the extent that you don't have this stuff correct, it may not work out quite like you expect, because in this case, I'm assuming they're going to spend about the same amount on advertising. Just to reinforce, though, the big three of demand are the top three: your price, your SQ rating for your shoes, and the number of models available. For example, watch what happens to the demand. 1424 here, if I go to 500 models. 1850. So I added 400,000 to my demand. So now let's go back to the 200. Okay. Back to the 1424. What if I cut my price by $4? 1,700. And you have to understand what the costs are. For example, you've got to figure out what the cost of producing those extra models are. But this is how you can figure out, where may I want to trade things? What about if I go to a 7-star shoe, all other things being equal? What happens to my sales? So these are the sorts of things that you can play around with as you try to optimize your offering. Some of these windows, when you make a change here, they actually make a change later in the program. Some of the windows don't. It will just flag to you when it doesn't match, and you'll get lots of warning screens. So you can see the various factors you can change. Down here, celebrity appeal. Everybody starts off with no celebrities. You can use this to figure out how much a celebrity is worth. You can actually load in, say, I'm willing to spend $8 million on this celebrity, or $2 million on this celebrity, load in their celebrity appeal, see what it's going to do for your sales, and then instead of spending the $2 million to buy the celebrity, spread the $2 million across the 4 regions advertising budget and see which you like better. So lots of opportunities to do some trade space here as you begin to optimize your position. This is the inventory liquidation. If you end up with too many shoes, then you may want to consider purging them through the inventory liquidation. In last semester's class, they were extremely competitive and ended up several times with far more shoes than they can sell, because they kept clubbing each other and then being overly optimistic in their sales projections. So one thing that's interesting about this, shoes that you clear through inventory clearance don't go into normal sales channels, which is to say it doesn't reduce the total forecast demand for the industry. It's like the shoes are sold on Mars or something like that. I can't explain it. But if you end up with too many shoes, you'll see it just gets painful. You're going to find that when you do inventory clearance, In this case, it actually shows a net profit at those prices. But you're going to find that usually when you get into the real game, if you're having to clear inventory shoes, it's not good. It's a matter of choosing from your least bad options. And so at the bottom of your sales forecast, it says down here, based on all these numbers, it projects you're going to sell 5.4 million shoes in the branded production. Your capacity is 6 million, so you can see you're operating about 90% of capacity. And it says that you could produce up to 1.8 million shoes for private label if you're using overtime. And some of that you'll see becomes important later. So this is where you tweak your position and you say, okay, I'm happy with my position. This is what I plan to do. And then you see what your sales forecasts are. Then we go on to the plan capacity tab, and I recommend you step through it just exactly as I am. Go through them sequentially by item. This is a tab that you won't necessarily spend a lot of time on, but it's an expensive tab. Selling capacity gives you some money, but obviously it's gone. This shows you how much capacity you have, regular time plus overtime. So you see you have 6 million in normal capacity and up to 7.2 million shoes with overtime. These are plan upgrade options. This is where I talk about position, trade-off, fit. All of these things are relatively expensive. So you're going to have to decide which and when and all that other stuff that you choose to do. Building new capacity is also very expensive, and you're going to want to know where your costs are. Some of these things, when you get into the various production costs, the mere fact that you have a plant establishes the entire part of that bill. So whether your plant has a capacity for 1 million shoes or 10 million shoes, certain costs are the same. Obviously, then some of those costs just get spread out by having each of your plants so greater capacity. Others are based on how many shoes you actually produce. So there's a lot to consider as you go in and you start adding capacity. So you don't typically make many decisions on these screens, but when you do make an input, it tends to be really financially impactful. Branded production. This is where you actually quote unquote build your shoe. So now I went in and I said in my sales forecast, I was planning to sell a 5-star shoe. If you go back here, well, actually I said 7 there, put 5 there. So I actually then have to build a 5-star shoe to sell in my North America plant. And so you can see I'm at 4 stars. So now I can start to decide, what do I want to do to raise it to a 5-star? Well, I can, for example, increase my superior materials. That drove me to a 5-star shoe, and notice that drove my manufacturing costs to $26.31 per shoe. Okay, so let me take it down now to 56. Still a 5-star shoe, a little bit cheaper. So you see, I still got the same shoe, but it cost me less money. So I can continue to play that game. What about 55? 26.18, oop, that dropped me down to 4 stars. Well, what if I spent that much extra in styling features? That brought me up to 5 stars. How did that production cost compare to my other production cost? And then you have the Six Sigma programs. These you more want to make a strategic decision and kind of stick with your Six Sigma because that will make a difference over time. But you can see there's lots of ways that you can affect the overall quality of your shoe. This is how you affect the productivity of your workforce, their pay, their base pay, incentive pay, and best practices trainings. So these sorts of things affect your worker productivity. And obviously, the more productive they are, the fewer workers you have to crank out a given production volume. So that's also important. Here, you actually enter the number of shoes that you want to be manufactured for branded. You see here, it's not full production. We have the capacity of, of 2,000, but I'm only using 1,700 for my branded. That may be because I think I'm going to be pretty active in my private label market. But again, you want to once you know how many star shoes you want and you have how many models you want to use, then you make these other tweaks to produce the cheapest shoe that you can to keep this down. And likewise, you invest in these sorts of things, which will also take your cost down because they will reduce your labor, your reject rate, and all that other stuff. Okay? So this is a screen that you will spend quite a bit of time using. Then you distribute your shoes. So now you've manufactured them in your 2 plants and you've got to ship them. This is where you consider the impact of your exchange rate and tariffs as to what is the best way to ship. For example, you wouldn't want to necessarily ship shoes to ship all your shoes out of North America down to Latin America to meet their demand, and then ship shoes from Asia Pacific into North America, because there you would pay a tariff, whereas here there's just trade-offs to be made. It's as simple as that. You're going to have to look at the tariffs and the exchange rates. So there is art in this. Figuring out the best way to manage this is a source of competitive advantage. And you can see that this does matter. It affects your freight costs. It affects your tariffs, storage costs, and other expenses don't tend to be determined so much. And so obviously, to the extent that you minimize these expenses, that's very good. Up here is where you consider the exchange rate. In year 11, there's no exchange rate influences. And this is also where you manage whether you're shipping the proper number of pairs to each region. Obviously, you don't want to run out of shoes. So this is a screen where you will spend a significant amount of time. Internet marketing, pretty straightforward. You have the ability to change your price, the number of models offered, and whether you offer free shipping. The big element of the price is creating channel conflict. So what the retailers hate to see is when you're charging less than a 40% premium above the wholesale price to sell on the internet. So let's assume that my wholesale price was $60. Well, they want to see 40% above that, so 1.4 times 60 would be $84. So if I price my shoes below $84, assuming again I have a retail price of 60, and that would be a very high price, 60 is a very high price, then what it simulates is the retailers in that region see your price and they go, I don't really like that. I don't like the fact that he's selling so cheaply on the internet, and they may choose to stop stocking your shoes, which cuts your ability to sell branded shoes in that region. You do have the opportunity to turn off the internet in any region. Don't really know why you would want to do that unless you had a particular branded sales strategy and you were being aggressive in the internet in some regions, but trying to preserve retailers in other regions, and you weren't blocking them out. So this would really be where you're offering a very different kind of strategy. Or it could be that you have an area where one region where the exchange rate is really horrible, and you just decide to not do any internet sales that region or that year because the exchange rates are so bad you'd be losing money, whereas you'd be making good money in all the other regions. Next is wholesale marketing. This is where you actually register your price. So what you do up on the branded sales forecast screen, I think when you change it there, it changes here as well. But again, you want to load these numbers in. This is the most important number in terms of stimulating demand on this slide. You've already set your stars, you've already set the number of models, so the next big thing is to establish the price, and then the rest of these factors will also determine how competitively attractive you are. And then when you do that pricing, now your costs are fixed. You've determined how many you're going to sell in that region, and you can just see if I take this price down to $45, right now it's showing me having an operating profit of 15.9%. Well, if I cut my price to $45, it's going to be lower. You can see it goes down substantially. And this is why you don't want to play screen to screen. You have already made the decision what your price is going to be, and you really shouldn't be wickering it, so to speak, on this screen. This screen should simply be registering the decisions you've already finalized previously and that you've tweaked using the branded sales forecast slide. This is a very good help page because it will go in and it will explain to you what all these things are doing to your costs and they're doing to your demand if you have any questions. So you don't tend to spend a lot of time on this screen because you should just be entering the numbers that you've already settled on other screens. Celebrity bids, you can see there's a whole group of celebrities you're going to have the opportunity to bid on. This is where you can decide them how much you're going to pay them per year. In year 11, there are 3 celebrities up for bid, and you get to priority rank them, and you can set a total bid. So let's just assume that I was willing to spend $5 million on Mannion, $5 million on Oprah, and $5 million on Beckham. So I could enter $5 million from each of them, but I say, well, who I really want is Beckham, and then Oprah, and then Mannion. And so I could say 1, 2, 3, and I could put a total cap here of 10 million. I bid 5 for each of them, and I put a cap of 10 million. Well, it may be that somebody bid 6 million for Beckham, so my 5 million offer bid isn't accepted. So there's my number 1 priority. But that still gives me the option to pick up Oprah and Peyton and stay underneath my cap. And so that's how that bidding works. And you can figure out down here what it's costing you per shoe, and you can, as you can tell, it can become pretty expensive per shoe. So if I say, for example, $5 million for my good buddy Peyton, you can see that that averages out to $1 per shoe. So you want to spend this money wisely. And again, you want to have it fit with your overall marketing strategy. Next is private label. Private label, like I say, is like producing shoes for Walmart or something like that. A couple of things. This is the global minimum that you should bid for the star quality. So it's saying here my current quality rating is 3 stars, so my bid wouldn't be accepted. I need to get it up and raise it to get it to 4 stars, and now that little caution light goes away. So I do superior materials, styling features, and then it gets into how many am I going to offer and where am I going to ship them from. Remember that the way bids are evaluated by the Walmarts of the world is on price down here, strictly bid price. So only if 2 people have the same bid price and they are the lowest bidders do they start going to some of the tiebreakers. So that's where you want to say you probably don't want to bid $35. You want to bid $34.97 or something weird like that as you begin to outguess each other. Then you get to determine whether your bid is accepted. Here's what I want to show you is what a dramatic difference this can make. If you look right now, my current earnings per share estimate is 2.61. But if I assume that I don't win that bid, it goes down to 2.38, which is a pretty significant change. You're going to learn private label is very competitive. So there's a lot of strategy that goes on in the private label market. When to bid, what to bid, how to bid, all that other stuff. So I think you're going to enjoy this. The last tab that we want to look at today is the finance tab. This is where you take out loans. This is early repayment of loans. This is the declaration of dividend, and this is the stock repurchase. And I'm trying to see where we issue stock. I'm sorry, it's over here. This is where we raise money by issuing stock. This is where we repurchase the stock. Again, don't get swept up in this thinking that this is where it's at. The finance and cash flow is important, but it will not take a losing company and turn it into a winning company. All it will do is take a good company, bad decisions will take a good company and weight it down, or take a bad company and weight it down even further. It won't take a bad company and make it a good company. One thing I want to caution you on is the dividend. Notice that the reset dividend is 0, but last year you paid $1 a share. It is a big deal to investors to cut dividends. So if you cut their dividend, you can expect that your stock price is going to be negatively affected because of that. Just something to keep in mind as you go forward. The rest of these reports you see over here are ones that we'll look at after the fact. But what I recommend is once you've gone through and you've made these decisions, then sometimes you're going to have to go back up and say, well, at the end of the day, my earnings per share aren't as good as I think they are supposed to be. So then you end up going back to the top and say, well, let's go in and tweak the sales forecast a little bit, tweak, 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 tweak. And that's why I say it almost takes 2 passes through the screens. Then you can save your decisions over here. What happens is when you call the screen up, it downloads all of the data from the server and it depicts it on your computer. You play with it, it analyzes it, and then when you save it, it overwrites that information onto the server. This is the alert and chat center. It shows you that I'm online, and this is where we have the audio mode, and this is the collaboration mode, which are new features. And this is how you can have multiple people on at the same time talking about what goes on, and this is where you can do online collaborate, and here you can talk through the computer. Here you could get the screen capture stuff going, and just like talk over your phones or something like that. Here, if you have a headset and all for the computer, you can enable the computer audio as well. Okay, that's a look at all these screens. At this point, you're going, ah! Don't worry, the practice round will make a lot of this more clear. Don't forget to bring at least one laptop per team, and I will see you in our normal classroom up on the 3rd floor for the Spring 2012 class on Wednesday night. Take care.